Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andre Luongo, and I'm the co-founder and general manager of Virtual Driver Interactive. Although I'm the general manager currently, most of my time with Virtual Driver has been spent in charge of all product and curriculum development. I have displayed my email address here, so feel free to contact me directly if you have any questions that come up after the call, but I think we'll have plenty of time for questions during the call as well. As a little background, Virtual Driver Interactive is a technology company. We're primarily focused on simulation-based training programs, and the company's been around for operation for nearly 20 years. But for this presentation, I'd like to talk about the benefits of simulation as it applies to driver's education. And this is not meant to be a sales pitch for VDI products, but I'll have to ask for your forgiveness in advance if I refer to our products as examples, as that's what I'm most familiar with. I believe we have 50 minutes, but my presentation won't take nearly that long, probably more like 15, which would give us plenty of time for questions and discussion. And I realize it's nearing the end of the day, probably for many of you. Let's see, I'll start off. I like to set the stage with a story about how and why VDI was created. My co-founder and I have known each other for many years, and we spent most of our careers in the technology field. Well, at the time, he was living in the Bay Area and I was living in Southern California. Well, he was coming down to visit me during the holidays and was traveling through LA in relatively heavy traffic, which is no surprise, which is a harrowing experience if you've never done it. But all of a sudden, he noticed there was a lawn chair in front of him in his lane. Well, in that situation, what do you do? And he did what hopefully any experienced driver would do. He slowed down at a safe rate, meaning not slamming on the brakes. He checked his mirrors, moved into the adjacent lane, no drama, no crash. But the only way he was able to safely navigate that situation, he was first paying attention to the road, meaning not distracted. He was traveling at a safe speed for the amount of traffic, maintaining adequate following distance, and most importantly, leaving enough space around his vehicle that he could move quickly into an adjacent lane if needed. So it took all of these skills to survive that event. So for the remainder of the drive, he kept thinking to himself, how did I know how to do that? And how would you teach a new driver how to do that? Meaning, how do you give them the experience necessary to survive what was a potentially dangerous situation without actually putting them in danger? And the answer inevitably was simulation, and hence the company was born. And by the way, that exact scenario is still included in one of our novice driver courses today. But getting back to driving simulation or simulation in general. So as you know, simulation has been used for many years in a growing number of fields, and for good reason, because there are just some skills that are better taught, or should I say necessarily taught, by doing and experiencing, not just via education and theory. In addition to providing higher quality training, simulation tends to be less expensive and more accessible than conventional training. It also provides a wider range of experiences that are not immediately available to someone who is still learning the skills. And of course, there are environments and situations where you wouldn't want to be caught practicing these skills for the first time. It's sometimes scary to think that there are drivers out there who have never been behind the wheel that practice among real traffic, putting all parties, including the driver instructor, at risk. So simulation provides a safe place to make mistakes and master a task. Of course, simulation is nothing new to driver's education. There's been some form of simulation that's been used for driver training for decades, actually. And it's actually fun to look back and see how far we've come in the quality of the experience. But it's not just the realistic experiences, or I should say the more realistic experience. It's also the type of scenarios that we can create and the ability to measure a student's response immediately and their competency and mastery of the skills. Let's talk about why simulation is particularly effective for driver's education. First off, it's engaging. I mean, this is especially important for teens. For them, it's a very familiar format. So the benefit is you'll have their full attention to the lesson material that's being presented. They can't help but absorb the material as they're so engaged with managing the simulated world. And second of all, it's immersive. So the student is placed in a world with realistic surroundings, variable traffic, and all the laws they'll face in the real world. And within that framework, they're required to respond to a wide variety of traffic scenarios and potentially dangerous situations. And as they learn to correctly negotiate these situations, it creates memories. So let me repeat, memories, not just knowledge, so that when they face those same situations in the real world, they'll remember what to do, not just have to think back to something that they learned in class. It's also challenging. So teens have a great eye-hand coordination and usually better reflexes than older adults, but unfortunately it tends to make them overconfident. What the challenge is for them and why they're actually slower to respond to situations is that they don't have the focus or experience to recognize or even anticipate hazards and hazardous situations. So let me give you an example. There's a scenario in one of our programs where a soccer ball rolls across the street in front of the driver from a row of parked cars that are sitting next to a park. And so when faced with this situation, the teen driver, if they're paying attention, carefully watches the ball as it rolls across the street. In contrast, the adult driver, seeing the ball, immediately looks back to the line of cars where it came from to see if there's a child coming out chasing after the ball. It's the same event, but the adult driver anticipates an upcoming hazard, usually because they face some similar scenario somewhere in their driving experience. The teen driver thinks he's paying full attention to the event, but cannot anticipate what might happen. And of course, the end result for the child chasing the ball and the driver is life-changing. So in simulation, we can put a new driver into situations that you couldn't or wouldn't want to do in the real world. We don't want a new driver to be faced with a kid running out in front of them or to drive distracted on a pass-fail basis because the costs are just too high. I remember asking a fleet manager about how he trains his employees in inclement weather such as fog and snow, and he said he couldn't because it was too dangerous. And I said, isn't that the point? To train them on how to handle some of the more dangerous aspects of driving, the issues that often lead to a crash. Well, see, in simulation, we create the experiences and measure the outcome in a controlled environment. We can provide experiences with the most challenging and dangerous situations without putting them or others in danger. With simulation, a common curriculum can be created and shared among all students in a class. So this provides consistent training across all of the students, and yet still provides the flexibility to address individuals who may be struggling with certain concepts, allowing them to repeat certain lessons as necessary. A program can be self-paced, fully self-contained, or instructor-led, which allows the program to be curated to focus on the most pressing topics. And it allows the opportunity for unlimited practice and a wide variety of different conditions, different weather and road conditions, all controlled or assigned by an instructor. So you compare this then with behind the wheel training. In behind the wheel training, you can only hope that during that in-vehicle training that something happens, a near miss ideally, so that the new driver gets some experience with challenging events, such as distracted pedestrians or interacting with school buses or hydroplaning, et cetera. And that every student in the class gets to experience that same situation. But unfortunately, that's usually not how it works. It's not very likely. And an unplanned event that happens during a drive that wasn't previously prepared as a learning moment just may not be effective. Really, the bottom line is when the way events unfold in the real world is not always the best way to teach the concept. Measurability. A good driving simulator can measure a wide variety of infractions from speeding, swerving, hard braking, following distance. And the advantage of a computer-based program is that it catches everything and unbiasedly for all students. Ideally, a simulation program can provide reports that help identify trouble spots with certain students and create a record that the student was able to master the techniques taught in the course. A simulation program that includes a pre-assessment allows the instructor to identify issues and tendencies and even attitudes of the students prior to starting the course, because not all students will begin driver training with the same knowledge or experience. And then a post-assessment then allows the instructor to confirm that the student has mastered those skills necessary to begin driving after taking the course. Now, there are disadvantages to simulation, mostly in the fact that they're not real cars. Simulation is not a replacement for years of experience that a student will eventually get behind the wheel of a real vehicle, but it does attempt to provide them the best head start possible and as much driving experience as you can pack into one semester. So even the most robust curriculum can't cover every possible scenario they'll face over their years of driving. In addition, as it is with all drivers, they'll have to learn the particular limits of their own vehicle, whether they normally drive a car or a truck or an SUV. But despite these limitations, simulation has proven itself over the years as impactful and measurable and cost effective. So schools across the country have had great success with their programs, improving the effectiveness of their driver training and saving the expense and risks associated with behind the wheel training. We even have a few local examples in Utah. The Provo City School District, I believe, and Granite School District all have simulators in their schools. And finally, let's see. Well, as promised, I've kept this presentation short in order to give plenty of time for questions or discussions. And again, I'm also aware that this is the end of the day for many of you, but so I appreciate everyone's attendance, and I'm happy to open it up for questions if I can get my chat to work. And again, feel free to contact me directly if any questions come up after the call. I'll try to get my chat working. Can you still see my screen?
Yeah, Andre, I can still see your screen.
Okay. All right. I took it off so I can read the chats. Okay. Well, we can open it up to questions if I assume they'll come in via the chat. If I can see. Okay. I assume I could read these and not answer via chat.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So the first question is, what districts are you affiliated with currently in Utah?
The ones that I know of recently, like I said, is Provo Unified School District and Granite are the two that I know of that are fairly recent in the last 2 years, I believe. So I'm not sure if the word affiliated means something different. Those are just.
In other words, do they use your product?
Yes, yes, they do. Yes, they do. Sorry.
How does the instructor monitor a student's progress while they're working on a simulator?
Okay, our simulators, again, I can only answer to ours in particular. Each student, is driving the simulator. They are given real-time scoring, meaning they're told if they have an infraction, they ran a red light, they're braking too hard, etc. And that appears immediately on a life bar for them in messages within the program. Then when they finish the program or finish the lesson, they get a score sheet that pops up, and that they can review it and the instructor can review it with them. If the instructor is not there as they end that lesson, everything is recorded in a separate management program that we call Vantage. And that's typically done in a school situation where you might have 6, 10, 12 simulators. It is all tied into a single management system where it's essentially a laptop where the instructor has access to it and can watch the scores, the scoring as it comes in for each student. So they can see their progress, they can see their performance in each of them, all the way down to drill down to each particular lesson and every infraction they have within that lesson. And of course, from that, you can print reports, save reports, Excel, PDF, etc. Hope that answers the question.
Is, are the simulators internet-based or installed on specific computers, or can students do simulators at home? And then they also ask, along with that, are they big simulators, like big, huge machines, or do they simply just hook up to a laptop or a screen?
Okay. Our simulators come in essentially two flavors. They come in a desktop model, which is much like a regular computer, except you do have a wheel and pedals along with it, and it would sit on a desk. So computer system that we build, plus the monitor, plus the wheel and pedal set. So that's what each student is doing. But we also have the full cab version, so it's in a frame, it's with a real car seat, not attached to a desk or a table of any kind. And so it's standalone. So that's sizable, about the size of a desk. It can be moved around because it has wheels, so it's easily lifted and moved around from from one room to the next if needed. So they come in essentially two sizes and two levels of mobility. But we offer the training and the hardware together. They're linked together. So we don't have sort of a software only that they can take home and do. I don't know if that was a three-part question. I may have only answered two of them, but I'm having to scroll, but it's great way back. Did I miss
No, you're
one?
fine.
Okay.
They asked the question of how many do they usually get purchased in a school, and that could just vary on your school size. I mean, let's just take Prova, for example. They started off with one, and now I think they have maybe 15.
20, yeah.
20.
They have 20.
So they just add some to them each year with their funding.
Yeah.
So that's just going to be different.
Right. It's not uncommon that maybe it's a school district purchasing for several high schools within the district, and they'll give them one or two each. Obviously, the ideal is you have enough for whatever that class is. Many times there's some level of instruction while some of the kids are actually working on the simulators themselves. Some lucky high schools have enough for everybody to do all at once. But the ideal is obviously the more the better. And the more you have, if it's one each, then it's used as a supplement for the driver training. It can be the driver training course essentially if there's one for everyone, because the course is again, I'm talking about our course, I apologize. Our course is fully self-contained. It really has a full narrator, a full instructor built in. So the student only has to go on, log into his name and password, and then away he goes. And the course takes them, instead of full entire curriculum, so it takes them from the very beginning all the way through.
Andre, how long is that? So like how long would a kid be on a simulator program to go through your program, for example?
Right. So I would say that if somebody sat down and took the entire course, it's about 2.5 hours. That is assuming they didn't retake any lessons, assuming they didn't then go beyond that and take practice, assuming they didn't then practice in different weather conditions, night conditions, etc., which offers further practice. But on the other side, there are schools that might pick and choose out of the 10 lessons, maybe 4 or 5 of them if they don't have enough time. So it's not also uncommon not to take the entire thing, depending on how much time an instructor would have within the semester or quarter.
What equipment or other software would a school need to have to be able to purchase them? And then what is the cost associated?
Okay, there's no other equipment. Like you said, the equipment is provided. So in the desktop or the full cab version, all the equipment is provided. So there's nothing else. And even if you have multiple simulators and the management system is, we provide even the laptop for that ties in, and all the networking equipment. Oh, I remember what they asked before. They asked if it was tied into the internet at all, and it's no, because we do not want teens to have access to the internet while they're on the simulator. So it doesn't connect to the outside world at all. It's all self-contained. The only thing it communicates with is the simulators communicate with the laptop, the management computer. Cost, you asked about cost. Okay, so costs range from, it's sub 10,000, so it's more like $9,400 up to 12,900, I believe, for the full cab with the larger 49-inch curved monitor. There are school district discounts, and so schools get a different discount, and discounts for multiple units as well.
Okay, I'm going to answer this question real quick because it's for me. They wanted to know how simulators are fit into the Utah program. And full simulators, like the one that he's talking about, is a 2-to-1 ratio. So if a student goes through that 10 module program, it's about 2.5 hours, and that counts as 1 hour of their behind the wheel time. Something like Street Smarts, that's not a full simulator type of program, is only counted as, it takes about 4.5 hours, and it counts as 1 hour of behind the wheel time. And only 3 of the 6 hours can be done on road or range or something like that. 3 of them have to be on the actual physical road. So that's how simulators fit in to the program.
Yeah, and that sounds like a pretty common ratio that we see across the country.
Yeah, and they're asking if there's a subscription or it just comes with the software.
It comes with the software. It's unlimited. It's, I guess it's officially a software license, but it's not limited. So you teach as many kids as you can do over 10 years, on average. So yeah, it's not limited at all. The essentially the trainer, the simulator is available 24/7 if you can use it and get people through.
So the cost is just buying the equipment.
Just the equipment, yeah. There's no additional costs.
So that answered that one-time cost question. Are simulator tests as efficient as being in person or doing it on the roadway? I think you kind of covered that a little bit, but if you
Can
wanted to
you read that
explain.
again? Something about being as efficient, you said?
Yeah, like in other words, is it teach a student as much as if they were physically out in a car?
Yeah, that's a broad question as far as the efficiency of the test. Again, it's probably pretty much most of the presentation, but I'll clarify. Is that one of the things on the scoring is again, I don't want to say the unbiased nature is maybe not the right word, but certainly consistent nature of the scoring. That the computer doesn't care. It marks down everything. It catches everything that you do, down to literally hard braking, what is considered hard braking, or you didn't wait exactly 3 seconds before taking off an intersection, et cetera. It's always vigilant from that standpoint. And the other aspect of that from behind the wheel versus behind the wheel training, again, is the events, is we can be extremely efficient in driver training. For instance, let me give you, let's say it's lessons about intersection, how to handle intersections. Let's just say there's 7 or 8 different types of intersections, including, let's say, railroad crossings, and 4-way, 2-way, 1-way, signal lights, left turn on signal or not, roundabouts, all of that. That can be done in a 10-minute drive. If you try to do that behind the wheel, you're lucky that you have all of those within a 10-minute drive from behind the wheel. So the number of experiences that can be, like I said, curated, we can do whatever we want. And so we can make these things happen and repeat the ones that really make sense, all within a relatively short drive.
Someone asked me another question. Is there funding available? Yes, simulators or improved equipment purchased for reimbursement. They want to know how you download the data. Is it sent to the teacher's computer, or do you have to retrieve it out of that actual system?
No, it is retrieve the data. So let's say, for instance, there's 10 simulators and the kids are running the simulators. Every kid logs in with their unique username and password. And so they're logging in. When they log in, it will show them exactly where they left off from last time, because they usually won't take it in one day, 2.5 hours sitting. They'll take it over a semester. They can take one course. It knows which ones they've taken and not. Well, anytime they finish a lesson and their score gets sent over to the laptop computer, to the instructor's computer, it's, I assume, sitting at a separate desk. And all of that information from all 10 simulators is feeding into that one management console. So they'll see everybody in every simulator and a record of whatever they've done. And of course, when you're dealing with a class or classes, you now can track the progress. If one person's still on lesson 2, 3 weeks into the semester, then you might need to address that individual person. But it all does feed into one. You don't have to go retrieve it. It automatically sends all the information to that management system.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Deanna said different cars have different sensitivities as far as the gas, the gas pedal or braking. How would you transfer over to say something about hard braking or different types of steering situations, or similar to that in a simulator?
Yeah, I'm looking at that. We certainly, the physics of the cars in the program, we do have SUVs and pickup trucks and passenger cars, and we do attempt to make those different as far as the heavy cars. Matter of fact, we have, it's not just novice driver training, we have adult or fleet training as well, and they have everything from large box trucks to semi trucks. And like I said, we do our best to calculate the braking sensitivity of that, but every car is slightly different. There's no doubt about that. So it really is a matter of how quickly they are slowing down. And at a certain point in the program, the car will react different as far as steering, et cetera. There are anti-lock brakes on most of them, but again, we do our best to match that physics as much as possible. But it really is just about how fast are they able to slow down. Now, a sports car can slow down a lot faster. I guess you would still call it hard braking. The point of the hard braking mostly is, in some of the lessons, is it's especially true in, let's say, the following distance lesson, where you keep a distance from the vehicle in front of you so that you have time to brake if needed. We do mention that, a lot depends on the type of vehicle you're driving and the type of vehicle you're following, because if you're following something, it can stop a lot much shorter. But the other part of the lesson is simply that if you engage in hard braking, not predictable braking, then you're in danger of being hit from behind as well. So that's just, it's just as much as the person behind you can react. So it really is just how fast are you deaccelerating your vehicle.
Anybody else have questions? And his email, it's on the agenda. If you if you forgot to write it down or don't have it, his information is on there. And just to be fair to other vendors, we have several vendors that we use in Utah. There's just Andre just happened to be the one that wanted to present. So
well, I'm happy to. Yeah,
you,
I hope it.
so
I hope I kept it broad enough. Like I said,
no,
when you
yeah,
ask
you were
specific
great.
questions, I can only answer it to ours. I mean, I obviously know something
Right.
about others, but it wouldn't be fair for me to speak on their behalf.
Yeah, and if people know the size of what Timpview High School and Provo High School is, they have 20 simulators within their district, but they have 10 at Timpview and they have 10 over at Provo, and they serve about well, sometimes it's different, about 500 kids in each high school for driver's ed through the year. There's everything between the desktop to virtual goggles. So this is kind of somewhere in between. Okay, thank you, Andre. It doesn't look like there's any other questions. If I receive some later, I'll definitely have them reach out to you.
Okay, yeah, they have access to my email anytime.
Okay.
Be happy. Well, again, I appreciate everybody's attention on this and allowing me to present.